My aunt took me in at 14 and turned me into her unpaid labor. Now, she wants me to leave my job to become her full-time caregiver. My parents died in a car accident when I was 14. My Aunt Julia was the only family I had left. She swooped in at the funeral talking about duty and blood, said she'd give me a home. What she really wanted was free childcare. The day I moved in, she handed me a schedule. Wake up at 5:30 to make breakfast for her 3 kids. Can you imagine someone trying to steal your entire life, not once, but twice? I thought I'd escaped the nightmare of my childhood, building a whole new world for myself. But then the phone rang, and her voice pulled me right back into a war I thought I'd already won. From the moment my parents died when I was 14, my Aunt Julia took me in. Or rather, she acquired free labor. I wasn't her niece. I was the live-in maid, the babysitter, the cook, the cleaner. Every single day, it was the same grueling routine. Pack lunches, walk kids to school, pick them up, homework, dinner, clean bath bed. And then, only then, could I start my own schoolwork, often until midnight. Her kids called me by my first name, never cousin. At school events, she'd introduce me as the girl who helps out, never family. I ate their cold leftovers, separate from everyone, after they'd finished. My bed, a mattress on the concrete floor of their unfinished basement. When I turned 16 and dared to ask about getting a job, Julia shut me down. The kids need you, she'd snap. Applying for college scholarships? She refused to give me tax information, said I should focus on the household. But I found a way. My guidance counselor, bless her heart, helped me file as an independent student, and I did it. A full ride to State University for engineering. Julia was furious. Who would watch her kids now? I left the day after graduation and never looked back. I worked every odd job, tutor math, anything to make ends meet. Graduated with honors. Got recruited by a tech company, starting at a salary I could only dream of. By 25, I was making over 6 figures. By 30, I was a senior engineer at a Fortune 500 company, pulling in serious money, with stock options, a downtown condo, traveling the world. I built a life. My life. Julia never called. Not once in 16 years. I heard snippets through mutual acquaintances. Her oldest became a nurse, the middle one in retail. The youngest had 3 kids by 3 different men. Julia's husband left her years ago. She was living alone in the same house. Then, last month, she called me at work. My assistant said it was urgent family business. Julia had diabetes, bad knees. She needed help around the house, and she decided I should move back home. Take care of her like she took care of me. She said I'd proven I could handle household duties. She even had the basement ready for me. The same basement, now with a space heater, she proudly announced. I thought she was joking. My blood ran cold. She wasn't. She'd already told her doctor I'd be her caregiver, listed me on medical forms, told neighbors I was coming home to help. She said I could just work remotely from her house. Tech jobs were flexible, right? I'd have plenty of time to manage her medications, drive her to appointments, cook special diabetic meals, and maintain the house. Just like old times, she chirped, but reversed. When I said, absolutely not, the pleasant facade vanished. She got nasty, reminded me that without her, I'd have ended up in foster care. I probably never would have gone to college. Definitely wouldn't have your fancy job. I owed her. My entire life, she claimed, was thanks to her sacrifice. The least I could do was return the favor. The calls started daily. Voicemails about how much she was struggling. Couldn't afford a nurse. Her kids were too busy. You're single, no kids, just work, she'd say, dripping with contempt. What else do you have going on? She gave me 4 years. For years. As if my life was just sitting on a shelf, waiting for her to need it. Then she escalated. She called my company's HR department, told them I was her registered caregiver, and needed family medical leave. HR called me, utterly confused. I had to explain that I hadn't lived with this woman in 16 years. She showed up at my condo building, telling the doorman she was my sick aunt who needed help. He almost let her up before calling me. I watched from my balcony as she sat in the lobby for 3 hours, telling anyone who'd listen about her ungrateful niece who abandoned family. Next, Adult Protective Services. She reported I was neglecting a dependent family member. A social worker actually came to my office. I had to prove I had no legal obligation to her. And then the ultimate slap in the face, an invoice. For years of room and board at market rates, food costs, utilities, even added interest. Total, $73,000. She said we could call it even if I came back for 5 years of caregiving. I was done playing nice. I hired a lawyer, Melody. Not for defense, for offense. Turns out, using a minor for unpaid labor violates several laws. Making a child work instead of allowing them employment, educational interference, potentially child abuse for that basement situation. Melody's letter went out certified mail the next morning. 3 pages of legal letterhead outlining violations I'd never even thought to name. Child labor laws, educational interference, housing code violations for keeping a minor in an unfinished basement with no heat or proper ventilation. The letter demanded Julia stop all contact immediately. No calls, no visits, no messages through third parties. It warned that continued harassment would result in formal legal action, including restraining orders and potential criminal referrals. Melody explained we weren't planning criminal charges unless Julia forced our hand, but the threat alone might be enough. I signed the authorization form and watched Melody seal the envelope. A part of me felt powerful, truly, for the first time since Julia's first phone call. Another part felt sick, like I was attacking someone who'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. But then I remembered that basement mattress, the cold leftovers, being called the girl who helps out. And the sick feeling shifted. It hardened. The letter would reach Julia in 2 or 3 days. I spent those days jumping every time my phone rang, checking emails constantly, looking over my shoulder in the parking garage. Julia had proven she could show up anywhere. A legal letter might make things worse. What if she showed up at my condo again angrier? What if she contacted my boss directly? I kept my phone on silent during meetings. I couldn't handle the anxiety. 2 days after Melody sent the letter, my desk phone started ringing. I ignored the first call. Then it rang again, and again. By the 5th call, I saw Julia's number. I let it go to voicemail. 3 more calls. Then my cell phone started. I blocked the number. She called from a different one. Blocked that too. Within 3 hours, she'd called my work line 17 times. My cell phone showed 12 blocked calls. I was starting to panic. Then Julia from HR called my extension. Her voice was calm, professional. She explained Julia had been calling the main company line too. The receptionist flagged it after the 4th call in an hour. HR was documenting everything. They'd added Julia's numbers to a blocked list. Any calls from her would be automatically rejected and logged as evidence of harassment. HR Julia asked if I needed any additional support, if I felt unsafe at work. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt protected by someone other than my lawyer. My company was helping me. I thanked her, and she told me to forward any other contact attempts directly to her. She'd handle it. That evening, I sat in a therapist's office for the first time in my life. Carly had availability on short notice, referred by Melody. The office was small, warm, with soft lighting and plants. Carly, maybe 50 with kind, gray eyes, asked me to start from the beginning. So I did. I talked for 40 minutes straight, without stopping, about my parents dying, Julia taking me in, that handwritten schedule she gave me on day 1. The years of labor, the basement, college, never looking back, building my career. Then her call last month, demanding I quit my job. Carly just listened, took notes, nodded. When I finished, She asked how I felt about those 4 years with Julia. I said I'd always been grateful she took me in instead of foster care. Carly tilted her head. Is that really what you feel, or what you think you should feel? That question broke something open in my chest. I realized I'd spent 16 years telling myself I was lucky, that Julia had saved me, that I owed her everything. But sitting there, saying it all out loud to someone with no stake in the story, I heard how wrong it sounded. A 14-year-old kid doing 60 hours a week of unpaid labor wasn't lucky. She was exploited. Carly helped me understand something I'd never let myself think before. Gratitude and abuse can exist in the same space. Julia did take me in. That was real. But she also violated labor laws and treated me like hired help instead of family. That was also real. One fact didn't cancel out the other. Her decision to house me didn't give her the right to work me like an adult without pay. It didn't excuse the basement, the exclusion from family meals, the interference with college. Taking in your orphan niece and then exploiting her labor for 4 years isn't generosity. It's something else entirely. Carly said that realization was the first step toward processing what had actually happened to me. I'd spent 16 years viewing my adolescence through Julia's lens. Now I needed to look at it through my own. I left that session feeling shaky, but clearer than I'd felt in weeks. 3 days after Julia received Melody's letter, building security called me at work. Julia was in the lobby. She'd told the front desk she needed to see me urgently about a family emergency. Security called up, just like they were supposed to. I told them I wasn't available and asked them to tell Julia to leave. I stared at my computer screen, hands shaking. Julia was 23 floors below me. She'd read the legal letter threatening criminal charges, and her response was to show up anyway. I pulled up the security camera feed for the lobby. There she was, purse clutched in both hands. She looked smaller, older, but her face had that same determined set I remembered from when she'd tell me I couldn't go to school events because the kids needed me. She didn't leave. Security approached her twice. I watched her shake her head. Then she started talking to people in the lobby. Business people, delivery workers, anyone who would listen. I couldn't hear, but I saw faces change from polite attention to discomfort. Some walked away quickly, others seemed sympathetic. One woman even patted Julia's arm. I felt sick watching it. She was telling them her version of the story. The poor, sick aunt, abandoned by her ungrateful niece. The girl she'd raised who now refused to help. I'd worked so hard to build my professional reputation here. Now Julia was in the lobby, telling strangers I was a terrible person. After an hour, building security called the police. I watched 2 officers arrive, talk to Julia. She showed them something on her phone, probably medical documents or that fake invoice. The officers talked to security, then back to Julia. Finally, they escorted her toward the exit. She went, slowly, still talking the whole way. I stood at my office window on the 23rd floor and watched her emerge onto the sidewalk. She looked up at the building, like she knew exactly where I was. Then she walked to her car and drove away. Melody filed for a temporary restraining order that afternoon. I forwarded her the security footage and the log of Julia's 17 phone calls. Melody said we had a strong case for harassment. The workplace disruption was particularly damaging. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. I'd have to see her in court, listen to her tell a judge why she should be allowed to keep contacting me. My stomach churned, but Melody said it was necessary. We needed the legal protection. Julia wouldn't stop on her own. That weekend, a certified letter arrived at my condo. Return address, a law office I didn't recognize. Inside, a letter from Julia's new attorney, threatening to sue me for elder abuse and neglect. It claimed I had a moral and legal obligation to care for my elderly aunt who had raised me. Julia's health was declining due to my refusal to help. It demanded I either agree to caregiving or face a lawsuit seeking damages for medical expenses and emotional distress. I read it twice, trying to understand her logic. Then I forwarded it to Melody. She called back within an hour, laughing. A real, hearty laugh. She said Julia's lawyer was either incompetent or desperate. There was no legal basis for forcing an adult niece to provide elder care. No court would award damages for refusing to quit your job and move in with a relative. The letter was pure intimidation, zero legal merit. Melody said it actually helped our case, showing Julia's harassment was escalating even after our cease and desist. We'd bring it to the restraining order hearing as additional evidence. I spent Sunday afternoon with my laptop open, typing out everything I could remember from age 14 to 18. That schedule Julia had given me. The basement with its concrete floor, a single mattress. How cold it got. Eating separately leftovers. Being introduced as the girl who helps out. Her refusing tax info for college. Missing school events because the kids needed me. Every memory made me angrier. Not the hot, explosive kind, but something colder, harder. I'd been a 14-year-old kid who'd just lost both parents. And Julia had looked at me and seen free labor. Someone to exploit while pretending it was generosity. Writing it all down made it real in a way it hadn't been when they were just memories I tried not to think about. By the time I finished, I had 12 pages of specific details, dates, examples. Melody told me this kind of evidence would be useful if Julia tried to paint herself as the victim. Now I had proof of exactly what those 4 years had actually looked like. Monday morning, I found a LinkedIn message from Sabine Farley. The profile photo showed a woman in scrubs outside a hospital, Julia's oldest daughter. I stared at the notification for a minute before clicking. The message was long. She'd heard through the family network about what Julia was doing to me. She wanted to apologize for how Julia treated me. She'd been in college most of those years, didn't fully understand. But looking back now, as an adult, she saw it was wrong. She also said she'd refused to help Julia with her current health situation. Julia had tried the same controlling behavior with her throughout her 20s. It took Sabine years of therapy to set boundaries. She ended the message saying if I needed someone who understood Julia's patterns, she was willing to meet. I forwarded it to Melody, who called me 20 minutes later, energized. Sabine's testimony could significantly strengthen our case. It showed Julia had a pattern of controlling behavior, not just with me, but with multiple family members. If Sabine provided a written statement, it would demonstrate Julia's current actions fit a long history of manipulation. I messaged Sabine back, suggesting coffee. Saturday afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe. She looked tired but smiled. She started talking before I could. Julia had always been controlling, but it worsened after her husband left. She tried to manage Sabine's nursing career, called her supervisor, showed up at the hospital, demanded access to bank accounts. When Sabine got engaged, Julia tried to take over the wedding planning completely. Sabine finally cut contact for 2 years until Julia agreed to respect boundaries. Then Sabine talked about her siblings. Quentin kept his distance because Julia criticized every job, every relationship. He eventually stopped telling her anything about his life. And Nain, the youngest, had it worst. Julia pressured her to have kids, even though Nain was barely making rent, saying family legacy was important. When Nain got pregnant, Julia was thrilled, but then tried to control every parenting decision. Nain ended up with 3 kids by 3 different men, relationships that fell apart partly because Julia interfered so much. Now Nain worked 2 jobs, barely keeping up. Julia still called, demanding visits. Sabine said their father left because Julia tried to control his retirement plans. He filed for divorce and moved to Florida within 6 months. I sat there, taking it all in. Julia's exploitation of me wasn't an isolated incident. It was her fundamental way of relating to people. Sabine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She was sorry she didn't protect me back then. She'd been so focused on escaping herself. I told her it wasn't her fault. She was just a kid herself, trying to survive Julia, too. Monday morning, I forwarded Sabine everything we'd discussed in a long email. She responded with a detailed written statement about Julia's controlling behavior with all her children and ex-husband, with specific examples and dates. She ended by saying she believed Julia was attempting the same pattern with me, and a restraining order was necessary. I sent it all to Melody. Melody called that afternoon, sounding even more energized. Sabine's statement was exactly what we needed. It showed the court that Julia's behavior wasn't about genuine medical need or family concern. It was about control and manipulation, exercised over multiple family members for years. The restraining order hearing was Thursday. Melody said we had a strong case now. Workplace harassment, false APS report, the lobby incident, and now evidence of a decades-long pattern. She told me to prepare emotionally. Julia would likely show up looking as sympathetic as possible. Thursday morning, I put on a navy dress. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Melody met me in the lobby. Julia's lawyer would argue against the restraining order. Melody would present our evidence. The judge would decide, probably that same day. We went inside. Julia and her lawyer sat at the other table. I saw her, using a cane, wearing a cardigan, sensible shoes. She looked smaller, older. When she noticed me, her expression shifted from neutral to wounded. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Melody guided me to our table. The judge entered, an older man with gray hair. Julia's lawyer stood first. He explained his client was a sick, elderly woman who had taken in her orphan niece. That niece, now successful, refused to help with basic caregiving despite her means. The restraining order would constitute elder abandonment. Julia had health issues requiring family support. She'd reached out in desperation, perhaps too persistently, but had no other options. Her other children couldn't help. She wasn't harassing anyone. She was asking for family help. The judge listened without expression. Then he asked Julia's lawyer about the workplace contact, the lobby incident, the false APS report. The lawyer said these were misunderstandings. Julia didn't realize calling HR was inappropriate. She thought she was arranging medical leave. The lobby visit was out of desperation to talk in person. The APS report was made in good faith because she genuinely believed I had a duty to help. Melody stood. She presented the timeline of Julia's escalating behavior. 17 phone calls in 3 hours, the 3-hour lobby sit-in, the APS report requiring a social worker, the cease and desist letter Julia ignored. Then, Sabine's written statement. Melody walked the judge through Julia's pattern of controlling behavior with all 3 children and her ex-husband. She showed it fit a lifelong pattern of manipulation, not genuine need. She presented my documentation about my teenage years, the schedule, the basement, the refusal of college help, the 16 years of silence until she needed something. The judge read everything carefully. He asked Melody about the timeline, how long I'd been independent, why Julia's other children weren't helping. Melody explained they'd all established boundaries due to her controlling behavior. The judge looked at Julia. He asked her directly why her own children weren't helping. Julia started crying. Her children were too busy. They didn't understand. She'd sacrificed everything for them, and now they'd abandoned her. The judge asked if she'd hired caregivers. She couldn't afford it. Her pension barely covers basic expenses. The judge looked at the paperwork. He noted Julia owned her home outright and received half her ex-husband's pension. He asked again why she hadn't hired help. Julia had no good answer. The judge removed his glasses. He said he'd reviewed all the evidence. Julia had engaged in a pattern of escalating harassment, workplace disruption, false reports, and refusal to leave private property. Sabine's statement indicated a long history of controlling behavior. While he sympathized with Julia's health challenges, that didn't give her the right to harass and manipulate family members who'd established boundaries. He granted the temporary restraining order. Julia had to stay at least 500 feet from me, my home, and my workplace. No contact through any means. Phone, email, social media, third parties. He scheduled a hearing for a permanent order in 30 days. Julia started crying harder. Her lawyer tried to comfort her. The judge was unmoved. He told Julia any violation would result in immediate legal consequences. Then he dismissed us. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. The weight that had been sitting on my chest was gone. Melody said the hearing went as well as we could have hoped. The judge clearly saw through Julia's victim act, but she warned me to stay alert. Some people couldn't accept boundaries, even court-enforced ones. Document everything, screenshot messages, save voicemails, call police immediately if Julia showed up. I thanked Melody and drove home. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a few minutes, just processing. Julia couldn't call me anymore, couldn't show up, couldn't contact my workplace. I was protected, legally protected. I went upstairs, changed into comfortable clothes, made dinner, watched a movie, went to bed early. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking up anxious. 2 days later, a Facebook message from an unrecognizable account. No photo, random letters for a name. It said I'd broken Julia's heart, that I'd destroyed what was left of our family, that she'd given me everything and I'd thrown it back in her face, that I was cruel and ungrateful. It went on for paragraphs. I read it twice, my hands getting colder. Then I took screenshots. Every single message. Emailed them to Melody. Melody called back within 20 minutes. She sounded almost excited. Julia had violated the restraining order within 48 hours. Melody would file a motion for contempt of court immediately. The fake account would be easy to trace back. I asked how she could be sure. Melody said, look at the details. Specific things only Julia would know. The sacrifice, the years, the sick elderly woman phrasing. Plus, the account was created today. She told me not to respond. Just document everything. The contempt hearing was Tuesday. Melody said judges took restraining order violations very seriously, especially ones that happened so quickly. We met at the courthouse again. Julia showed up looking confused, defensive. The judge reviewed the motion. He looked at Julia with obvious displeasure. He asked if she understood what no contact through any means meant. She said she thought that meant in person or by phone, not social media. The judge held up the restraining order paperwork. He read aloud, no contact through any means, including phone, email, social media, or third parties. He asked Julia if she understood English. Julia's lawyer tried to intervene, but the judge cut him off. This isn't complicated, he said. Julia had been ordered to have zero contact. She'd violated that order within 2 days by creating a fake social media account to send harassing messages, showing either a complete disregard for the court's authority or an inability to control her behavior. Either way, it's unacceptable. The judge fined Julia $2,000 on the spot. He said the restraining order was now permanent. Number 30-day review, no second hearing. Julia sat there, frozen. Her lawyer tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. He looked directly at Julia and told her any further violations would result in jail time. Not a warning, not another fine. Jail. He asked if she understood. Julia nodded, her face white. The judge wanted to hear her say it. Her voice came out small. Yes, I understand. He told her she had 48 hours to comply with all terms. Stay away from me. My home. My workplace. No contact whatsoever. The court would not tolerate another violation. Melody gathered her files, and we walked out. Julia stayed seated, her lawyer talking to her, but she wasn't responding, just staring at the table. My phone rang that evening. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A male voice said my name, asked if I had a minute. Who is this? I asked. It's Quentin, he said. Julia's middle kid, the one who worked retail. I sat down on my couch. He apologized right away for calling out of the blue. Said he got my number from Sabine. He wanted to apologize for his mother's behavior. I didn't know what to say. He kept talking. He'd kept his distance from Julia for years because she tried to control everything. He finally had enough. Moved 3 hours away. Changed his number. He only talked to her on holidays. Watching her harass me, he said, brought back all the reasons he'd left. He thought I was doing the right thing, protecting myself. I thanked him, told him I appreciated the call. He said if I ever needed someone to verify what Julia was like, he'd be happy to help. Then he had to get back to work. We hung up. I sat there holding my phone. Work became my escape. I threw myself into a major project that had been sitting on the back burner during all the Julia drama, a database architecture redesign. Complex stuff that required total focus. My manager noticed. He stopped by my desk a few days into my deep dive. Said my performance hadn't suffered despite everything going on in my personal life. He was impressed with how I'd handled the situation. Kept it professional. Didn't let it affect my work quality. He said that took real strength. It made me feel like I was good at something again, like I had value beyond just being someone's problem. I stayed late, came in early, lost myself in code and system design. It felt good to solve problems that had clear solutions, unlike family stuff where nothing ever made sense. My therapy session with Carly that week focused on Julia's kids reaching out. Sabine first, now Quentin. Carly asked how I felt. Confused mostly, I said. These were people who'd called me by my first name when we lived together, never treated me like family. Now they were supporting me against their own mother. Carly said that was significant. It meant Julia's toxicity wasn't just my perception. Her own children recognized it, had to protect themselves from it. I wasn't alone in seeing who Julia really was. That hit me hard. I'd spent so long thinking maybe I was ungrateful. Maybe I should have been more understanding. But if Julia's own kids couldn't deal with her, maybe I wasn't the problem. Carly reminded me I'd been a child when Julia took me in. Children don't owe adults anything for basic care, especially when that care came with exploitation. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. 3 weeks passed with no contact from Julia. No calls, no fake social media, no showing up. Just silence. I started to relax. Went back to my normal routine. Hit the gym. Met friends for dinner. Worked on my presentation for the quarterly review. I remembered what my life was like before Julia crashed back into it. Quiet, productive, mine. I slept better. Stopped checking my phone constantly. Stopped looking over my shoulder. The restraining order was working. Julia was actually staying away. I started to believe this might really be over. Then Isaiah called me from the lobby. Nadine was downstairs with her 3 kids. They wanted to wait for me. Is that okay? He asked. I said I'd come down. I was curious what Nain wanted. Plus, the kids shouldn't be punished for Julia's behavior. I took the elevator down, found Nain sitting on the lobby couch with a toddler on her lap and 2 older kids playing on their phones. She stood up, looked exhausted, dark circles, messy ponytail. She apologized for showing up unannounced. Said she tried to call but didn't have my number. I asked what was going on. She glanced at her kids. Asked if we could talk somewhere private. Isaiah let us use the building's small conference room. Nain sat down heavily. Julia had been calling her constantly, multiple times a day, demanding help with groceries, doctor appointments, cleaning, cooking. Nain worked 2 jobs, morning shift at a warehouse, evening at a diner. Her kids were in school or with a neighbor. She barely had time to sleep, couldn't take on Julia's needs, too. But Julia wouldn't stop calling. Wouldn't accept no. Kept saying Nain owed her, that she'd raised her. Nain looked at me with red eyes. She wasn't asking me to help Julia. She just wanted me to understand that Julia's desperation was real. Her health issues were real, but her approach was completely wrong. Nain felt trapped, knowing her mother needed help, but knowing she couldn't provide it without destroying her own life. I listened to Nain describe her situation. Single mom, 3 kids, 2 jobs, barely covering rent and food. No savings, no support system except a kind neighbor. Julia had pushed her into having children she wasn't ready for, told her family was everything. Nain had her first at 19, second at 21, third at 23. Different fathers who all left. Now she was drowning. I saw myself in her story, another one of Julia's victims. Someone pressured into life choices that served Julia's vision instead of their own goals. I reached into my bag and pulled out one of Melody's business cards. I told Nain she might benefit from legal advice about establishing boundaries with Julia. Melody had helped me. Maybe she could help Nain too. Nain took the card, stared at it for a long moment. Then she started crying, saying thank you over and over. We went back to the lobby. She collected her kids and left. I rode the elevator back up to my condo feeling sad instead of angry. Julia's need for control had damaged all her relationships, not just mine. Her husband left. Her kids kept their distance or struggled under her demands. She'd pushed everyone away. But I also felt clear about my decision. Helping Julia would mean sacrificing my own life, my career, my peace, my hard-won independence. I'd already given her 4 years as a teenager. Years I could never get back. Years that should have been about growing up normally, not being unpaid labor. I wasn't giving her any more. She'd made choices that led to this isolation. Those weren't my choices to fix. The next morning, I got an email from my company's vice president. Subject line, congratulations. I opened it, read it twice. I was promoted to principal engineer. Significant raise. Stock package. Expanded responsibilities leading a team of 12 engineers. Start date in 2 weeks. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. The timing felt like validation. Like the universe was confirming I'd made the right choice. Building my own life instead of returning to Julia's basement to be her caretaker. I'd worked for this promotion for 3 years. Julia had wanted me to throw all of that away. I closed my laptop and made breakfast. Then I called my manager to accept. The team picked an Italian place downtown to celebrate. My manager ordered champagne. Everyone raised their glasses, made toasts about hard work paying off. Maria, a senior developer, sat next to me. She leaned over between bites. She'd been watching how I handled everything these past months. How I stayed focused in meetings, even when my phone buzzed. How personal drama never affected my code reviews or deadlines. She said most people would have fallen apart or taken leave, but I kept showing up and doing excellent work. That takes real strength, she said. I thanked her, and something shifted inside me. Julia had spent 4 years teaching me I was only valuable for what I could do for other people, that my worth came from serving her needs. But I'd built a career where people valued my skills, respected my boundaries. I handled Julia's harassment with clear thinking and professional help, instead of collapsing or giving in. That was growth Julia never showed me. She always responded to problems by blaming others and demanding they fix things for her. I'd learned to solve my own problems and protect myself. The difference felt huge. 3 days later, Melody called my cell. Her voice had that careful, professional tone she used for important news. Julia's lawyer had reached out about settling the invoice situation. Apparently, Julia was willing to drop her entire $73,000 demand if I agreed to drop any potential claims against her for child labor violations. Melody, said the lawyer, made it sound like a generous offer. Part of me wanted to just agree, make it all disappear, sign whatever papers ended this nightmare. The temptation felt strong because I was tired of thinking about her. But Melody's voice got firmer. Julia needs to face consequences, she said. Not just have everything swept under the rug because it got inconvenient. Julia had exploited a teenager, filed false reports, harassed me at work, violated a restraining order. None of that should just vanish. We talked about options. Melody suggested a counteroffer. Julia drops all financial demands and agrees to permanent no contact through a legally binding agreement. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal or civil claims related to my teenage years. That way, Julia faced real consequences, and I got guaranteed protection. Julia's lawyer responded within a day. The speed surprised me. Julia would sign a legally binding agreement to never contact me again through any means. Complete separation. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue claims. Melody reviewed the proposed agreement. It was solid, enforceable in court with clear penalties. We added clauses about financial penalties for violations and attorney fee recovery. The whole process took less than a week. Melody scheduled a signing appointment. I read through it one more time. Every clause about no contact, violations, penalties. The part where Julia acknowledged the agreement was voluntary. I picked up the pen and signed my name on 4 different pages. Melody witnessed my signature. She'd send it to Julia's lawyer. Then it would be done. Sitting in that conference room, I felt a strange sense of closure. This wasn't the dramatic confrontation I might have fantasized about. Julia wouldn't apologize or admit what she'd done. No moment where she finally understood. But the agreement was clean, final, and protected me going forward. That mattered more than any apology. I met with Carly 2 days later. I told her about the legal agreement and how it felt both satisfying and empty. She nodded, asked what I meant by empty. I explained that part of me wanted emotional resolution, acknowledgement from Julia, maybe even an apology, though I knew that was unrealistic. Instead, I got a legal document that said we'd never speak again. Carly leaned forward. Legal closure and emotional closure are different things, she said. You can have one without the other. The legal agreement protected me. That was valuable. But it didn't give me emotional resolution because Julia would never understand or apologize sincerely. She'd probably tell people I was ungrateful and mean for the rest of her life, and I needed to be okay with that. I sat with those words. Then I realized I was okay with it. Julia's understanding wasn't required for me to move forward. Her apology wasn't necessary for me to heal. I had built a good life despite her, not because of her. I had a career I loved, friends, my own condo, money in the bank. I'd achieved all of that by leaving her house and never looking back. The legal agreement just formalized what I'd already done emotionally. I didn't need Julia's validation or remorse to know I'd made the right choices. I used 3 vacation days and booked a flight to Iceland. I'd wanted to go for years. Now felt like the right time to do something purely for myself. I landed in Reykjavik, rented a car, and drove to a small hotel. The landscape looked nothing like home. Black volcanic rock, green moss mountains. I spent the weekend driving, looking at waterfalls and hot springs. On Sunday, I hiked to Seljalandsfoss, a waterfall you can walk behind. I stood there, water crashing down, mist soaking my jacket. Tourists took photos, couples posed. I just stood still and breathed. For the first time since Julia called my office 2 months ago, I felt completely free from her influence. She couldn't reach me here, couldn't call or show up or send lawyers. I was standing in front of a waterfall in Iceland, doing exactly what I wanted with my life. Julia had tried to trap me back in her basement, serving her needs. Instead, I was traveling the world with money I'd earned and freedom I'd fought for. The contrast felt perfect. When I got back from vacation, I had about 40 emails and a voicemail from Sabine. I called her back while unpacking. She said she'd heard through Quentin that Julia hired a home health aide using her pension money. Apparently, the legal fees and fines from violating the restraining order had scared her into finding actual solutions, rather than trying to guilt-trip family. The aide came 3 times a week. Julia was managing her diabetes better with proper support. Sabine said Julia complained constantly about the cost and how she shouldn't have to pay for help when she had family, but she was paying for it anyway because she didn't have other options anymore. I felt a small sense of satisfaction, not because Julia was struggling, but because she'd finally accepted reality. She needed help and had to pay for it like everyone else. Her children weren't obligated to sacrifice their lives for her convenience. I wasn't obligated to give up my career because she'd taken me in as a teenager. She'd made choices that led to this isolation, and now she was dealing with the consequences. That felt fair. Work picked up significantly after Iceland. My manager assigned me to lead a high-profile project, defining the next phase of my career. A new platform for data processing, serving millions of users. Managing a team of 8 engineers, reporting directly to the VP. Tight timeline, high visibility. Exactly the kind of challenge I'd been working toward. The work felt good. I was grateful Julia's harassment hadn't derailed my trajectory. It could have if I'd let it consume me. If I'd spent months fighting or trying to make her understand or feeling guilty. Instead, I'd handled it quickly with legal help and moved on. My career kept advancing because I'd protected it by protecting myself. 6 months after Julia's initial phone call, I woke up on a Saturday morning and made coffee. Sunlight streamed through the windows. No plans, just the gym later, dinner with a friend. I sat at my kitchen table, checking emails, reading news. Then I realized I hadn't thought about Julia in days, maybe even a week. She used to occupy my mind constantly. Every phone call, every notification, a new worry. I'd spent months with this constant, low-level anxiety. Now it was gone. The absence felt like a gift I'd given myself. By standing firm, by hiring Melody, getting the restraining order, signing the agreement, by refusing to sacrifice my life for Julia's convenience, I'd protected my peace, my career, my independence. The anxiety had lifted because I dealt with the threat instead of hoping it would go away. I sat there drinking my coffee, grateful for that clarity, grateful for understanding that standing up for myself wasn't selfish or mean. It was necessary and healthy and exactly what I needed to do. A week after getting back from Iceland, Sabine texted. Her birthday was coming up, and she wanted to have dinner with family. She'd love if I could come. I stared at my phone. Part of me wanted to say no. Family gatherings meant stress. But Sabine wasn't Julia. She'd supported me, given a statement for the restraining order. She'd chosen to maintain a relationship with me, separate from her mother. I texted back. I'd be there. The dinner was at a restaurant downtown. I showed up early, nervous. Sabine arrived with her husband and 2 kids. Quentin came next with his girlfriend. We all sat at a big table. The conversation flowed easily. Sabine's husband talked about his job. Quentin's girlfriend had funny stories. The kids showed me games on their tablets. We laughed, shared stories, talked about travel plans. It felt normal, like actual family interaction without the weight of Julia's control hanging over everything. Nobody mentioned Julia until dessert. Sabine said Nain couldn't make it because she was working a double shift. Then Sabine's phone buzzed. A group text from Nain. Sabine read it aloud. Nain was thanking me for the lawyer recommendation. Apparently, Melody had a colleague who specialized in family law. That lawyer helped Nain set up legal boundaries with Julia, limits on how much money Julia could demand, how often she could call, what she could ask Nain to do. Nain said it changed everything. She finally had protection from her mother's constant demands. I felt something shift inside me. My stand against Julia hadn't just protected me. It created space for her other children to set their own boundaries. They'd watched me refuse to sacrifice my life for Julia's convenience. That gave them permission to do the same. We were all healthier for it, all better off for not letting Julia's need for control run our lives. The dinner ended late. Everyone hugged goodbye. Sabine's kids asked when they'd see me again. I promised to come to their soccer game next month. Driving home, I felt good, connected, like I'd reclaimed something Julia tried to take from me. Family didn't have to mean obligation and exploitation. It could mean people who chose to be in your life, people who respected your boundaries, people who wanted you around because they liked you, not because they needed something from you. The next week, I had my regular appointment with Carly. I told her about Sabine's birthday dinner, how good it felt, how my boundaries with Julia helped her kids set their own. Carly listened. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She thought we should talk about ending therapy. Not stopping completely, but moving to monthly check-ins. I'd processed most of the immediate trauma, developed healthy coping strategies, built a support system, learned to enforce boundaries. The work we'd been doing was reaching a natural conclusion. I was surprised. Therapy had become a safe place, but then I realized Carly was right. I wasn't coming in crisis anymore. I was coming to report on how well things were going. That was progress, evidence that I was genuinely healing. We agreed to monthly sessions. I left her office feeling proud of how far I'd come. 6 months ago, Julia's phone call had sent me into a panic. Now I had legal protection, healthy boundaries, and real family connections. I'd built a life that Julia couldn't touch. At work, my manager pulled me aside. The company was expanding our mentorship program for junior engineers. They wanted someone experienced to work with new hires from difficult backgrounds, someone who understood what it was like to build a career without family support. She asked if I'd be interested. I said yes immediately. The idea of turning what Julia did to me into something useful felt right. We spent weeks building the framework. I pushed hard for practical stuff, navigating company politics without family connections, building networks from scratch, handling guilt when family didn't understand career choices. 3 months later, the program launched. I got matched with 3 people. A guy whose parents kicked him out for being gay, a woman whose family expected money every month, and a foster kid who'd aged out of care. Our first group meeting felt awkward, but then the foster kid asked how I dealt with people asking about family during holidays, and suddenly we were all talking. I told them about learning to say my parents passed away without my voice shaking, about finding friends who'd invite me for Thanksgiving without making it weird, about building a life where holidays didn't feel like reminders of what I didn't have. The woman dealing with family money pressure asked how I handled the guilt. I was honest. It never fully goes away, but you learn to separate what you actually owe from what people try to make you think you owe. Saying no gets easier. We met every other week. Sometimes work, sometimes the hard parts. I looked forward to those meetings. Helping them figure out their paths felt more satisfying than technical problems. A few weeks into the mentorship program, a text from Sabine. Julia's health had improved since getting proper medical care. Apparently, Julia hadn't been taking her diabetes medication consistently. The desperate medical emergency Julia had described had been somewhat exaggerated. I wasn't surprised. Julia had always been dramatic when she wanted something. But knowing her health crisis wasn't as serious made me feel better about my decision. I hadn't abandoned someone actually dying. I'd refused to enable someone who wanted to control me. I forwarded the text to Carly during our monthly check-in. She pointed out that this was exactly the kind of manipulation Julia had used my whole life, creating fake urgency to make me feel like I had no choice. I'd finally learned to see through it. That spring, I went to a tech conference. During a panel, I noticed someone asking great questions. Afterward, we both headed to the coffee station. Her name was Rebecca. We started talking. Within 5 minutes, we were complaining about workplace politics. She worked at a different tech company doing similar work. We grabbed lunch. At some point, she mentioned being estranged from her family and the relief she felt building a life on her own terms. I told her I understood completely. We exchanged numbers. Over the next few months, we texted, met up. Dating felt different with someone who got it. She didn't push me to explain my family situation or suggest reconciliation. She understood some relationships are better left behind. I found myself telling her things I usually kept private about the basement, the schedule, feeling like unpaid labor, Julia showing up, the restraining order. Rebecca listened without judgment. She shared her own story about parents who wanted her to be someone she wasn't. The relationship developed slowly, naturally. No pressure, just two people who understood each other. One morning in late summer, I realized it had been exactly 1 year since Julia first called my office. The date clicked as I got ready for work. A year ago, I'd been blindsided by her demands, shocked she had the nerve. Now, I was in such a different place emotionally that it felt like remembering something that happened to someone else. I'd gone from reactive and defensive to confident and clear about my boundaries. I had a support system I'd built on purpose. Legal protection, professional success, a relationship with someone who saw me as an equal. Julia's manipulation hadn't destroyed me. It had pushed me to finally deal with all the unresolved stuff from my teenage years and come out stronger. That fall, my company announced promotions. My manager called me into her office, looking pleased. Senior principal engineer, expanded responsibilities, more stock options. But what excited me most was leading people. My manager said she'd chosen me partly because of the mentorship program. She'd heard my ments were thriving. "You understand what it's like to work your way up without advantages," she said, "and that makes you a better leader." My first week, I met with each team member. I told them I valued their growth as much as technical output. Several looked surprised. Around the same time, Sabine texted, asking if Quentin and I wanted dinner at her place. "It's time we started acting like actual family," she said, instead of people who only connected through Julia drama. I said yes immediately. Quentin agreed. The dinner was surprisingly normal, fun. We cooked together, talked about our jobs, relationships, random stuff. Her kids ran around. Quentin joked we were the family we chose instead of the one we were born into. Sabine raised her wine glass. It felt true and good. We decided to make it a regular thing. First Friday of every month, rotating houses. No Julia talk unless absolutely necessary. Just us, building the sibling relationships we'd never really had. That winter, I started seriously house hunting. My condo had been perfect, but I wanted more space. A yard, a real home office, a guest room for Rebecca. I looked at places in neighborhoods I'd always admired. Found a house I loved. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a finished basement. Hardwood floors, big windows. A kitchen with enough counter space to cook. The basement had carpet, drywall, proper heating. A real bedroom down there. The contrast to Julia's unfinished basement with my mattress on the floor couldn't be more obvious. I put in an offer. It got accepted. Moving day felt significant. This wasn't just a new house. It was proof of everything I'd built, starting from nothing. Julia had given me a basement and a schedule and years of unpaid labor. I'd turned that into a 6-figure salary, a leadership role, and a house I owned outright. Standing in my new living room, surrounded by boxes, I felt proud of myself in a way I rarely allowed. Meanwhile, my ments were hitting their own milestones. The guy whose parents kicked him out got promoted. The woman dealing with family money pressure set firm boundaries. The foster kid presented at a company-wide meeting and crushed it. They'd all grown more confident, more willing to advocate for themselves. During one of our group sessions, the foster kid said something that stuck with me. He said watching me succeed after everything Julia did made him believe he could build something real, too. My example showed him that a terrible start didn't mean you were stuck there forever. I realized Julia's exploitation had taught me resilience and self-reliance in ways she never intended. The pain had shaped me into someone who could survive anything and help others do the same. That didn't make what she did okay, but it meant something good had come from it anyway. 2 years after everything got settled legally, Sabine texted me while I was in a meeting. Julia's health aide had quit that morning without notice. Apparently, Julia asked Sabine if she thought I might reconsider helping out. Sabine told her about the no-contact agreement and reminded her that ship had sailed years ago. I read the text during a break and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no anxiety, no urge to fix Julia's problems. just mild curiosity about whether she'd find another aide quickly. That absence of emotional reaction told me more about my healing than any therapy session could have. I had completely moved on from Julia's grip on my life. Work was going incredibly well. I'd been promoted twice more since the legal drama ended. My team had grown to 15 engineers, and I loved mentoring them. My relationship with Rebecca had deepened into something real and stable. We'd been together for over a year, and she understood my past without letting it define who I was. The monthly dinners with Sabine and Quentin had become one of my favorite traditions. We'd built the sibling relationships we never had growing up, choosing each other as family instead of being stuck with obligation. My mentorship program at work had expanded to over 30 ments. Seeing them succeed made me feel like Julia's exploitation had accidentally taught me something valuable about resilience. One evening, my partner brought up the idea of moving in together. They'd been looking at houses with extra space for a home office. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in house hunting together. I realized I was ready for that step, ready to build a home with someone who saw me as an equal partner, someone who valued my opinions and contributions, who shared responsibilities naturally, who never made me feel like I owed them for basic kindness. The healthy relationship felt like proof that I'd broken the cycle Julia tried to trap me in. Looking back on everything, I'm grateful I stood my ground and refused to sacrifice my life for Julia's convenience. She got 4 years of my teenage life as free labor, and that was more than enough payment for a basement mattress and leftover food. Now I'm living the life I worked hard to create, surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can do for them. My success isn't despite Julia's exploitation, but it's definitely not because of it either. I built this life myself, starting from nothing, and nobody can take that away from me. What about you? Have you ever had to fight to build your own life and peace against someone who thought they owned you? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.